The book opens with a direct and almost provocative idea. Wealth is no longer optional in the modern world. It is a necessity. Donald Trump and Robert Kiyosaki do not frame riches as luxury or greed, but as survival. They argue that the world has fundamentally changed, yet most people are still operating with outdated beliefs about money, work, and security. The promise that education leads to a good job and a good job leads to a safe life has quietly collapsed. Jobs are no longer secure, pensions are disappearing, and governments themselves are drowning in debt. Against this backdrop, the authors explain that their desire for others to become rich is not rooted in generosity alone, but in realism. Poverty, they argue, is becoming more dangerous with each passing year, and those without financial intelligence will suffer the most. Trump and Kiyosaki immediately challenge the idea that money is a taboo subject. They observe that many people feel uncomfortable discussing wealth, either because they see it as immoral or because they believe it is unattainable for people like them. This discomfort, the authors suggest, is itself a form of conditioning, one that keeps people trapped. Rich people talk openly about money, investments, and risk, while poor and middle-class individuals are often taught to avoid such conversations. This silence becomes a prison. By refusing to learn the language of money, people surrender control of their financial futures to employers, banks, and governments. The narrative then shifts to the growing divide between the rich and everyone else. The authors emphasize that this gap is not accidental. It is the result of systems that reward financial knowledge and punish ignorance. Taxes, laws, and corporate structures are written in ways that favor those who understand them. Trump speaks from his experience in real estate and business, explaining how the wealthy use legal structures to protect assets and minimize taxes, while ordinary workers are taxed before they ever see their income. Kiyosaki reinforces this point by explaining that most people work hardest for money they never get to keep. They labor for wages, pay taxes first, then struggle to survive on what remains. A central idea introduced early is the difference between working for money and having money work for you. The authors explain that most people spend their lives chasing raises, promotions, and job titles, believing that higher income will solve their problems. Yet with each increase in income comes increased expenses, lifestyle inflation, and deeper dependence on employment. True wealth, they argue, does not come from earning more, but from owning assets that generate income regardless of whether you are actively working. This distinction becomes the philosophical backbone of the book. The tone grows more urgent as Trump and Kiyosaki discuss fear. Fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of losing money. These emotions dominate financial decision-making for most people. The authors do not dismiss fear. Instead, they acknowledge it as universal. What separates the rich from the poor is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Trump reflects on his own business failures, explaining that setbacks did not define him, but educated him. Kiyosaki echoes this sentiment, arguing that mistakes are the tuition paid for financial education. Those who avoid risk entirely may feel safe, but that safety is an illusion that erodes over time. Education becomes a major focus, but not in the traditional sense. The authors criticize schools for failing to teach financial literacy. Students graduate knowing how to memorize facts, pass exams, and follow instructions, but not how to read financial statements, evaluate investments, or understand cash flow. This gap leaves people vulnerable. They become dependent on financial advisors, employers, or government systems that may not have their best interests at heart. Trump and Kiyosaki argue that self-education is no longer optional. In a rapidly changing global economy, the responsibility to learn falls entirely on the individual. The first part of the book also introduces the idea that money is deeply connected to personal values and identity. People often say they do not care about being rich, but the authors challenge this claim. They argue that what people truly mean is that they are afraid of the responsibility that comes with wealth. Money amplifies who you are. It gives you more choices, more influence, and more accountability. For those unwilling to confront their weaknesses or question their beliefs, wealth can feel threatening. Yet without it, individuals are left with fewer options, less freedom, and greater vulnerability. As the opening narrative unfolds, Trump and Kiyosaki make it clear that this book is not about quick fixes or lottery-style success. It is about a shift in mindset. They insist that becoming rich begins with accepting that the old rules no longer apply. Loyalty to employers, blind faith in governments, and dependence on traditional education systems are no longer sufficient. The world rewards those who think independently, take calculated risks, and continuously educate themselves. The authors position wealth not as an end goal, but as a tool, a means to protect oneself, one's family, and one's future in an uncertain world. The cost of ignoring money is rising. Inflation, debt, and economic instability quietly punish those who remain passive. Trump and Kiyosaki emphasize that wanting others to be rich is not about envy or arrogance. It is about awakening. In a world where financial storms are inevitable, wealth becomes a form of shelter. The choice, they argue, is no longer whether one wants to be rich, but whether one is willing to face the consequences of not becoming so. As the narrative deepens, Trump and Kiyosaki move from diagnosis to direction, focusing on the mental divide that separates those who build wealth from those who remain trapped in financial struggle. They argue that money is first won or lost in the mind. Long before a person's bank account changes, their beliefs about risk, failure, and opportunity must shift. Many people, the authors explain, are unconsciously programmed to seek comfort over growth. They choose predictability, even when that predictability slowly drains their potential. This mindset leads to dependence on salaries, benefits, and approval from authority figures, while quietly eroding personal power. The authors emphasize that the wealthy do not think in terms of job security, but in terms of financial systems. Instead of asking, "How much do I earn?" they ask, "How does money flow?" This change in perspective transforms everything. Income becomes something that can be designed, not begged for. Trump explains how businesses, brands, and assets are structured to create streams of cash flow that persist over time. Kiyosaki reinforces this by returning to the concept of assets and liabilities, explaining that true assets put money into your pocket, while liabilities take money out. Many people mistakenly believe their homes, cars, and possessions make them rich, when in reality these items often increase financial pressure and dependence. Fear once again takes center stage, but now in the form of criticism and social judgment. The authors argue that one of the greatest obstacles to wealth is the fear of being misunderstood. Society often praises conformity and punishes deviation. People who question traditional career paths are labeled reckless or unrealistic. Trump and Kiyosaki point out that innovators and entrepreneurs are frequently mocked before they are admired. This social pressure keeps many intelligent and capable individuals locked into lives they secretly resent. The authors encourage listeners to become comfortable standing apart, reminding them that approval does not pay bills and opinions do not create freedom. The discussion then turns toward leadership and responsibility. Wealth, the authors argue, is a byproduct of value creation. Rich individuals are not necessarily those who work the hardest, but those who solve the biggest problems or influence the largest number of people. Trump speaks about branding and visibility, explaining that leadership often requires stepping into criticism and scrutiny. Kiyosaki adds that financial leadership begins with personal responsibility. Blaming the economy, employers, or upbringing may feel justified, but it keeps power external. Once responsibility is accepted, choice returns, and with choice comes opportunity. A significant portion of this part is dedicated to understanding debt. Trump and Kiyosaki challenge the common belief that all debt is bad. They argue that there is a critical difference between destructive debt and strategic debt. Poor debt finances consumption, things that lose value over time. Rich debt finances assets, things that produce income and grow in value. The problem, they explain, is that most people are never taught this distinction. As a result, they accumulate debt that enslaves them while fearing the very tools that could free them. Used wisely, debt becomes leverage, a way to accelerate growth rather than delay it. The authors also address the emotional cost of financial ignorance. Stress, anxiety, and relationship strain often stem from money problems, yet people avoid confronting them. Trump and Kiyosaki argue that ignoring money does not make problems disappear. It magnifies them. They describe money as a mirror that reflects discipline, habits, and priorities. Those who avoid looking into that mirror remain confused and overwhelmed. Those who study it gain clarity, even if the process is uncomfortable at first. Another recurring theme is time. The authors emphasize that time is the one asset everyone shares, yet few manage wisely. Trading time for money through hourly wages creates a ceiling on income. No matter how hard one works, there are only so many hours in a day. Wealth building, they argue, requires breaking this equation. Businesses, investments, and intellectual property allow effort to compound beyond physical limits. Trump describes deals that took months to structure, but generated value for years. Kiyosaki reinforces the idea that the goal is not to work less, but to work once and get paid repeatedly. As this section progresses, the authors confront the myth of perfection. Many people wait for the perfect idea, the perfect timing, or the perfect conditions before acting. Trump and Kiyosaki argue that this waiting is simply fear wearing a respectable mask. Progress comes from action, not certainty. Mistakes, they insist, are not signs of failure, but indicators of movement. Those who succeed financially are often those who fail faster, learn quicker, and adjust more intelligently than others. Trump and Kiyosaki remind the listener that financial freedom is not granted, it is chosen. Every day presents small decisions that compound over time: what to learn, whom to listen to, where to invest energy. Wealth is not built in dramatic moments alone, but in consistent alignment between intention and action. The authors make it clear that becoming rich is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming more of who you already are, but with clarity, courage, and control. The journey, they suggest, is not easy, but it is available to anyone willing to think differently and act decisively. As the story moves forward, Trump and Kiyosaki shift attention from individual mindset to the larger systems that govern money, power, and opportunity. They argue that understanding these systems is what separates those who struggle endlessly from those who move with confidence through economic uncertainty. The world, they explain, is not random. It is structured by laws, incentives, and rules that reward certain behaviors while penalizing others. Those who never learn these rules are forced to play a game they do not understand, often mistaking hard work for progress while remaining stuck in place. The authors return to the subject of taxes, presenting them not merely as an obligation, but as a strategic factor in wealth creation. Trump discusses how tax codes are designed to influence behavior, encouraging investment, development, and job creation through incentives. Kiyosaki emphasizes that the wealthy do not evade taxes illegally. They plan intelligently within the law. The problem, they argue, is not taxation itself, but ignorance of how it works. Employees earn money, get taxed heavily, and then try to survive. Investors and business owners structure income so that taxes are minimized and reinvestment is encouraged. This difference alone, they suggest, can determine financial destiny over a lifetime. A strong emphasis is placed on entrepreneurship, but not in a romanticized way. Trump and Kiyosaki are clear that entrepreneurship is not for everyone and that it comes with pressure, uncertainty, and responsibility. However, they argue that the skills developed through entrepreneurial thinking, problem-solving, negotiation, leadership, and resilience are essential even for those who never start a business. Thinking like an owner rather than an employee transforms how one approaches opportunity. It shifts focus from task completion to value creation, from obedience to initiative. The authors then explore the role of teamwork and mentorship in building wealth. Contrary to the myth of the self-made individual, Trump and Kiyosaki emphasize that success is rarely achieved alone. Wealth is built through networks of skilled people: lawyers, accountants, advisors, partners, and mentors. The key, they explain, is knowing how to assemble and lead a team rather than attempting to master everything oneself. This requires humility and discernment. Poor decisions often come from either blind trust or total isolation. Financial intelligence includes knowing whom to listen to and when. Management becomes a central theme. Trump and Kiyosaki argue that the wealthy do not avoid risk, they manage it. They study deals, understand worst-case scenarios, and prepare exits before entering. Poor and middle-class individuals, on the other hand, often perceive investing as gambling because they lack education. This fear keeps them in low-yield environments where inflation slowly erodes their purchasing power. The authors stress that ignorance is far riskier than informed action. Learning reduces fear, while avoidance magnifies it. The narrative then addresses global change. Technology, globalization, and automation are reshaping economies at unprecedented speed. Trump and Kiyosaki warn that traditional jobs are becoming vulnerable, not because workers lack effort, but because systems are evolving. They argue that adaptability is the new security. Those who rely on a single income source place themselves at the mercy of forces beyond their control. Diversification of income, skills, and investments becomes essential. The future, they suggest, belongs to those who can learn, unlearn, and relearn continuously. Another key idea introduced is the difference between being busy and being productive. Many people equate long hours with progress, yet remain financially stagnant. The authors argue that wealth is created through leverage, leveraging capital, people, systems, and ideas. Trump discusses large-scale projects that required coordination rather than exhaustion. Kiyosaki explains that financial freedom comes not from doing everything yourself, but from building structures that function independently. This realization challenges deeply ingrained beliefs about effort and reward. The emotional dimension of money is revisited with greater depth. Trump and Kiyosaki acknowledge that money intensifies personal traits. Confidence becomes influence, insecurity becomes recklessness. For this reason, personal development is inseparable from financial growth. They argue that unresolved fears, ego issues, and limiting beliefs sabotage wealth more effectively than market downturns. Self-awareness, discipline, and integrity are presented not as moral ideals, but as practical necessities for long-term success. The authors confront the idea of entitlement. Many people believe they deserve financial security simply because they work hard or follow the rules. Trump and Kiyosaki reject this notion bluntly. The market does not reward intention. It rewards value. Effort without strategy leads to exhaustion, not wealth. This perspective may feel harsh, but the authors frame it as empowering. Once people stop expecting fairness from systems, they can begin designing outcomes instead of waiting for rescue. The section closes with a powerful reflection on legacy. Trump and Kiyosaki argue that wealth is not only about personal comfort, but about influence across generations. Financial ignorance is inherited just as easily as financial intelligence. Parents who avoid teaching money skills pass confusion and fear to their children. Those who learn, practice, and share financial education create stability that outlives them. Wealth, in this sense, becomes a responsibility. It is not merely about accumulation, but about stewardship. By the end of Part 3, the listener is left with a clear message. The world favors those who understand its rules. Complaining about inequality without learning how systems work changes nothing. Knowledge, action, and responsibility form the foundation of financial power. Trump and Kiyosaki emphasize that becoming rich is not about exploiting others, but about mastering oneself and the environment in which one operates. The tools are available. The question is whether one is willing to use them. As the book reaches its final movement, Trump and Kiyosaki return to the central question that frames the entire narrative. Why do they want others to be rich? The answer, they explain, is not rooted in charity or moral superiority, but in urgency. A world burdened by debt, instability, and rapid change punishes the financially unprepared without mercy. Governments can promise security, employers can offer reassurance, but none of these guarantees endure. Wealth, in their view, becomes a form of self-defense. It grants individuals the ability to adapt, to choose, and to respond rather than react when circumstances shift. The authors emphasize that financial freedom is not a destination reached suddenly, but a discipline practiced daily. Small decisions compound quietly, shaping outcomes over years rather than weeks. Trump reflects on the importance of focus, explaining that wealth demands clarity of purpose. Distraction, whether through comfort or fear, dilutes effort. Kiyosaki reinforces this by stressing consistency. Financial intelligence is not about making one perfect investment, but about developing habits that align with long-term goals. The difference between success and stagnation often lies in persistence rather than brilliance. Failure is addressed one final time, now framed not as an obstacle, but as a teacher. Trump speaks openly about losses, setbacks, and public criticism, explaining that resilience is built through exposure, not avoidance. Kiyosaki adds that many people fail financially not because they make mistakes, but because they quit learning after making them. The ability to recover, reflect, and re-enter the game becomes the defining trait of those who succeed. Fear of failure, they argue, costs far more than failure itself ever could. The narrative then turns inward, focusing on character. Wealth amplifies intent. Without discipline and ethical grounding, money can magnify recklessness and greed. Trump and Kiyosaki caution that financial power should be matched with responsibility. Reputation, integrity, and trust are described as invisible assets, easily damaged, difficult to rebuild. Long-term wealth, they insist, is sustained not only by smart deals, but by credibility. In a connected world where information travels instantly, character becomes currency. A recurring theme in the closing pages is freedom of choice. Money, the authors argue, is not valuable for what it buys, but for what it removes. It removes dependency, desperation, and fear-driven decisions. Financial freedom allows individuals to walk away from toxic environments, to support causes they believe in, and to invest in their own growth. Trump and Kiyosaki challenge the listener to reconsider what freedom truly means. It is not leisure without purpose, but autonomy with responsibility. The authors also revisit education, urging continuous learning as a lifelong commitment. Markets evolve, laws change, and opportunities shift. Those who stop learning fall behind, regardless of past success. Trump emphasizes staying informed and adaptable, while Kiyosaki highlights curiosity as a financial skill. Asking questions, seeking mentors, and studying mistakes, both personal and external, keep individuals relevant in a competitive world. Ignorance, they warn, is not static. It grows more expensive over time. As the conclusion unfolds, Trump and Kiyosaki address the emotional resistance many feel toward wealth. Guilt, self-doubt, and fear of judgment often sabotage progress. The authors argue that wanting to be rich is not shameful. Poverty does not make one virtuous, just as wealth does not make one corrupt. Money simply reveals priorities. The real danger lies in pretending that money does not matter while quietly suffering its absence. Acknowledging the desire for financial freedom is presented as an act of honesty, not greed. The final message is one of empowerment. Trump and Kiyosaki stress that while not everyone will become extremely wealthy, anyone can become financially stronger, smarter, and more independent. The journey begins with awareness and continues through action. Waiting for permission, approval, or perfect conditions delays progress indefinitely. The authors encourage listeners to start where they are, with what they have, and to improve incrementally. Momentum, once built, becomes its own source of confidence. As the book closes, the tone shifts from instruction to challenge. Trump and Kiyosaki make it clear that the information alone will not change lives. Transformation requires application. Knowledge without action becomes entertainment. Action without knowledge becomes chaos. True financial growth lies in balancing both. They remind the listener that the world will not slow down, simplify itself, or become more forgiving. Those who prepare will navigate it with strength. Those who do not will feel its weight